know EXA very well. We represent at the EU level 21 association of ship owners. We have the pleasure to have today with us a representative of DG Move of the Commission to present the FuelEU Maritime Regulation, as well as some worked example. And this workshop follows two internal EXA webinars we have had over the last year, in which we presented the regulation to you as well. So the presentation will be cut into two parts, a presentation, a short Q&A, a second part of the presentation on worked example, and then Q&A again, so that you have the occasion to ask all the questions you may have. This time we will be recording the presentation made by the Commission, but we will not record the Q&A. So this part will not be shared afterwards, so that you can feel free to ask all your questions as well. So please mute yourself during the meeting and switch off the video unless you are speaking, to ensure that the bandwidth can hold this. And when we come to the Q&A, that's something I will repeat as well. Please introduce yourself and your company, because I think it will be interesting for the Commission to know exactly who is asking the question. So please, Peter, Ricardo, the floor is yours.
So, thank you very much for organizing this this webinar. We are very happy to be here and very pleased to see the significant amount of colleagues who are joining online and also in the room. So thanks for your interest in the FuelEU regulation. My name is Peter Xaga and I work in DG Move. The unit is called the Maritime Transport and Logistics, and I'm a member of the team that is dealing with the FuelEU regulation. There's three of us, all three of us are here. Ricardo, who you might know well, and Hans-Peter, the third person. I joined in April, so I was not participating in the negotiations of the FuelEU, but I'm throwing my whole weight into the implementation part. So that's where we are. The three of us are doing the work. So, as Fanny said, two presentations today. First, I will give a general overview about the regulation itself, just the main elements, the main framework, so that everybody starts from an equal basis. You all understand the integrity of this entirety of this regulation, and then Ricardo will do a worked example, kind of a step-by-step process from a viewpoint of the operator, how compliance with this regulation should be done. So I'm sure you know the basic things about the FuelEU. It was adopted in September this year, and it will come into force. It came into force, but it will be applied from January. 1st of January 2025. So we have almost a year until it kicks in. It's not that much. There's still a lot of work to be done on the side of the Commission, but also on the side of operators. So I think it's very timely that we start with such webinars, with such explanations already well ahead. I mean, one thing for ship owners is, of course, to know the regulation, to know your obligations, the requirements, how you comply. But I think another and equally important thing is that ship owners, they need to make decisions about long-term, mid-term investments. You know what kind of ships you are ordering, what kind of retrofitting you are doing, what kind of technologies you are deciding to incorporate in your vessels. So it's very important that you are factoring in these regulations into your midterm and long-term investment decisions, into your business decisions. So I think the objective to understand and really master this regulation is twofold. So maybe we can start with the real presentation after this short introduction. First, I take one step back and look at a little bit from the distance, saying that the FuelEU Maritime Regulation is included in the Fit for 55 package. I'm sure you heard a lot about Fit for 55. The EU made certain commitments for reducing carbon emissions, also internationally, and this Fit for 55 package lists a number of regulations that are supposed to deliver on these commitments. There was a decision made very clearly that all sectors of the economy have to participate in the carbon reductions, including the maritime sector. but other transport sectors as well, aviation, road. So we have 3 important maritime-related regulations and a number of other Fit for 55 regulations that are impacting the life in the maritime sector. The 3 key regulations are, the first one is the inclusion of the ETS, inclusion of maritime in the ETS, the EU Emission Trading Scheme. I'm sure you are quite familiar with this regulation already, as it kicked in from the 1st of January this year. So actually the reporting is already needs to be happening. There were a number of webinars that took place in the autumn. Many of them were addressing directly stakeholders. There's a Q&A on the ETS, so I'm sure you're already mastering this this part of the regulation. And I have to underline that while the EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime, they have very different requirements. The objective is the same, to reduce carbon emissions, and there are a lot of similarities between the 2 regulations in terms of various issues, but they cannot be the same, obviously. There are important variations, and during the presentation I will be pointing out where the important differences lie, so that you cannot assume that certain things that are laid down in the ATS, they will be the same in the FuelEU Maritime, but in other cases it's the case. So there's also surge regulations, the IFIR, the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, and this is requiring EU ports to develop shore power facilities and bunkering infrastructure for alternative fuels. So this is providing the infrastructure for the implementation of the FuelEU, and also for complying with the ETS and trying to reduce carbon emissions and fuel use. So this is the wider picture. Now we can go straight into our regulation. This slide is quite dense, but I will further on during the presentation, I will be unpacking all these elements. I will see a little bit more about almost all these facts about the regulation. But to start with, there are 2 key requirements that formulates the heart of our regulation. The first one is that FuelEU is establishing reduction targets for the yearly average greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used on boards. So you see there a timeline going from 2025 until 2050, and there's a sliding scale of reductions, which needs to be, the ships are obliged to meet these reductions year by year, period by period. It's important to summarize the scope, which is the regulation is catching ships above 5 times the 5,000 gross tonnage, regardless of the flag. So all ships that are calling in European ports, they need to be participating in this. They all fall under this regulation. So there's a level playing field between European ships, European actors, and non-European operators. 100% of the intra-EU traffic is covered, but only 50% of the international traffic. And here already just pointing out one difference between the EU ETS and our regulation is that for international trips, all the alternative and low carbon fuels that are used by the ship, they can be allocated to the 50% of the trip that we are covering. So this is a lighter approach, while in the ETS that's kind of different. They take 100% of the emissions and then they are halving it. It's a different approach, and there have been some debates about the interpretation, but now formally we are established and can confirm our approach. So all the alternative fuels can be allocated to the 50% of the trip that falls under the FuelEU regulation. Another important thing to emphasize is that the FuelEU is technology neutral. There's the obligation to reduce your the intensity of your carbon emissions, and use an increasing proportion of zero and low carbon sustainable fuels. But there's no obligation. We don't prescribe what type of fuels and what type of technologies you need to use. And I will explain a little bit, of course, later on about how the qualification of different type of fuels, how they will be counted towards our targets. There are a number of exemptions in the regulations. They've been obviously put there by the request of various member states, taking into account geographic specificities like serving small islands, connections between island member states that don't have a land border with other European countries like Cyprus and Malta. Outermost regions, they are also treated differently, and then ice class ships and ships navigating in ice, they also have a specific treatment. So, but we believe that all these exemptions, I have a hold on reply. Am I?
You're still.
I'm not sure.
Just minimize it.
Minimize it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so it should be fine. Yeah. Okay, but just flag me if there's any problem, and if you don't hear me well, if you don't see me well. Okay. So, but we believe all these exemptions are not undermining the objective of the regulation. Even with these exemptions, we will be able to achieve the carbon reduction targets that we set our mind on, that we committed to. So one core requirement was about the greenhouse gas intensity of the energy use board, the limits related to this. The second one is an additional requirement for using for zero emission at berth. So ships in ports that are at berth, they have to connect to OPS, onshore power supply facilities, or they should use alternative zero emission technologies. That is compulsory as of 2030 for container and passenger vessels, so not all the vessels. And then, between 30 and 35, and until 35, there are certain exemptions, certain specific rules that I will go a little bit in more detail later on. So these are the two core requirements of the regulation. Other important elements that need to be emphasized is that we are including CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide, and we are working on a full well-to-wake calculation basis. And we believe that this is allowing a fair, just comparison of fuels. There are also some flexibility mechanisms in the regulation. I will explain them later. These are the pooling, the borrowing, and crediting of allowances. There are deterrence penalties for non-compliance, and also there's a very strong connection with the MRV regulations. So the monitoring and the reporting, it's actually happening in the framework of the MRV. So I go down after this general overview slide a little bit deeper in the specific elements. So here you see the reduction targets. As you see, it's immediately obvious from the chart and from the grid that what we are talking about is a relatively slow introduction, a relatively mild, moderate targets at the beginning until 2035, and then the reduction becomes much steeper, much more ambitious. The reason for this is that we clearly understand the specificities of the maritime sector. We know that the lifespan of a vessel is 25, 30 years, but you correct me if I'm wrong. We know that vessels take several years to manufacture, so these decisions, they need to be done well in advance. We understand that it's a fast changing, moving field. The area of technologies, low fuel technologies, there are changes, science and the supply of these and the development of these technologies is non-stop happening, and also the fuel availability the development of new type of fuels is also a fast-growing and fast-changing field. So you want to leave some time for the fuel supply to stabilize and also the price of the alternative fuels to become closer to the fossil fuel prices. So that's why there's the slow introduction. We are using the reference value of 2020 in the MRV fleet data and the fuel mix as per MRV reported fuel consumption. So this is about the reduction targets. This slide is to emphasize that we are taking well-to-wake methodology. So first we look at the well-to-tank, and then we look at the tank-to-wake. It's the whole life cycle of a fuel. We have to look at extraction, processing, refining, transport and distribution, and then also the combustion and the conversion. And all these things are being covered. There's no partial coverage of the fuel, of the different types of fuels that we are talking about. We believe that that's the only way to ensure the environmental integrity of the regulation. There are various compliance technologies that can be used for complying with the regulation. This is a very nice picture that was done actually by Ricardo. You see the green boxes. They are actually the technologies that can be used for compliance with the regulations. So there are various sail system, kite sail system, ring sail system, solar sail system. If you equip your ship, your vessel with such systems, then they will matter. They will be the impact of these, the energy used like this will be calculated. They will have an input. They will have an impact on compliance with the regulations. Of course, renewable and low carbon fuels, they are the key element there. The use of onshore power supply is also counting towards the regulation, as well as auxiliary power units, low carbon fuel and hydrogen fuel cells. So fuel cells are also counting in, and there are a number of boxes, technologies that you see there that are not highlighted or rounded with green, and these are the ones that are helping energy efficiency. So they will be not ready. We will not be counting this towards the regulation. Just a word about onboard carbon capture and storage. For the moment, the regulation is not counting the use of such technologies, because we believe that this technology needs to be further demonstrated. There needs to be assurances about that such equipment is meeting certain standards, certain requirements. So it's not a recognized option for the moment, but we understand the interest of the industry about this. So we kind of commit that in future assessments, we will be investigating this issue, how CCS can be brought on board of the regulation if certain requirements are being met in terms of transparency, in terms of certification. And we are likely to launch a work stream that will be looking at this issue, how CCS can be made part of the regulation. Next slide about fuel use. So as I said, it's the task of the operators to decide what kind of fuels they are using. We see there, there's a big interest in various types of alternative and low carbon fuels. We believe that it is important that operators are looking at a variety of options, and they do. We receive information when we are meeting with industry or when we are seeing the press that there's a lot of activities looking at different types of fuels, most importantly methanol for the moment, but ammonia is heavily researched and considered. Of course, LNG is already there, and but we believe that it's a kind of a transitional fuel. It's a case to use now. But later on, when we are having more steep reduction targets, then the use of LNG will not be sufficient. So we see when we look at order books, like this year or last year in 2023, we see how the number of vessels that are being ordered, the dual fuel use vessels, methanol vessels, they are growing in proportions. I think there was in the news a few days ago also that first time in 2023 the number of methanol ships that were ordered is higher than the LNG ships. So the transition from LNG towards methanol is already happening, and it's a gradual process, but it's taking place. We also see that bigger companies and container ships, they are doing better. They are in the forefront of this transition. The statistics say that bulk carriers and car carriers, they are a little bit behind. So there's this there's this division for the moment in how the investment is happening in new vessels, but obviously this might change. We understand that investments needs significant upfront costs, and bigger players, they are easier, in a better situation to make these investments. But of course, medium-sized and smaller-sized enterprises, they also need to move ahead with this regulation. One thing to say also is that it's not only the type of the fuel, that the way the fuel is manufactured, that's also crucial. So we can move from gray fuels to blue fuels and finally to green fuels. So the amount of renewable energy that is used is crucial to reach the desired carbon savings, the carbon emission savings with the fuel. The next slide is dedicated to RFNBOs, renewable fuels of non-biological origins. While we said that the regulation is technology neutral, RFNBO is a bit of an exemptions. We are trying to promote the use of RFNBOs with two specific measures, with two specific mechanisms. One of them is a multiplier. So if there's a multiplier of 2 from 2025 until 2033, so operators will be rewarded, ships will be rewarded if they are using an RFNBO during this period. And there's also a so-called sunrise clause. So if the share of RFNBOs in the maritime fuel mix is less than 1% by 2031, then a mechanism kicks in. There will be a 2% sub-target from 2031 if it's required. Now there are also references in the regulation that the Commission will have to look at the availability and the price of the RFNBOs. We look at the market and we see that the availability is very problematic. The price is very problematic. Then the Commission has the ability to not to kick in this sunrise clause. So there are some safety clauses that are included there. But we do believe, and a lot of stakeholders and member states believe, that it is important to push on the use of RFNBOs because they are really and they are a superior type of fuels. Here I talk a little bit now about the use of zero emission technologies and OPS at berth. So the second requirement, it applies to container ships and passenger ships. So it is important that by 2030, ships are equipped with specific plugs that permit them to connect to onshore power supplies. And it's also important for ports to be ready to provide the connection. So we are talking a lot to ports. They are aware of their obligations. And they need to do the proper investment. Also, there's a lot of talk about the availability of grids that are able to handle the large amount of electricity demand that will be coming from large size of ships, especially cruise ships. So there need to be preparation on the ship side, but also on the port side. Of course, there are exemptions for the use, and you can see the exemptions listed there. They are quite obvious, I think, all kind of emergency and unusual situations. But beyond this, you know, everybody has to prepare for this requirement. It is important to emphasize that this requirement is not only about carbon emissions, but also about air pollution. It has not just climate change objectives, but also to make sure that you know, people living in ports, the air quality in ports is not impacted so badly by large ships positioned in the port as would have been without these regulations. So one way is to connect to onshore power supply, but the other way is to use zero emission technologies, and the regulation is listing a number of zero emission technologies that is qualifying for this purpose. We shall be doing and implementing regulations that qualifies the criteria what need to be used to place a technology on this list, and also this list, the table, will be updated regularly with new zero emission technologies when we are convinced that these technologies are reliable and they can be checked that they are truly meeting the criteria that we set in place. The next slide is about the eligibility of fuels. So here we talk about a number of different fuel types. You see the clear connections with the RED, with the Renewable Energy Directive. There are specifically references to concrete articles of the RED, Article 29 for the sustainability and the greenhouse gas saving criteria for biofuels. I want to emphasize here one big thing is that no food and feed crop biofuels will be qualifying for this regulation. So if you are using a crop that is based on food and feed crop biofuel, then actually the emission factor for this will be like fossil fuel. So here we want to make sure that land use change impacts, deforestation impacts are not messing with our carbon, with our objectives, and we are not having unintended consequences on land use and on deforestation, on forestation. The RFNBOs and recycled carbon fuels, we are using the threshold from the RED Article 27, and for low carbon synthetic fuels, there's the revised gas directive that is relevant, and fuels not meeting these criteria, they were treated as fossil fuels. So it is important to meet these requirements laid down in RED in order to be sure that the fuels that you use are counting towards the target with the good emission reduction factors and not going back to the default fossil fuel emissions. Here, I want to talk a little bit about fuel certification, which is a very important cornerstone of the regulations. Obviously, we need reliable certification system, the RED certification, the proof of sustainability for feedstock and production, but also for the whole life cycle of the fuel. It is essential to provide an integrity for the regulation and to provide a level playing field among different fuels. So we will require a fuel certificate to be submitted together with the bunkering documents, and we need to include the greenhouse gas savings for each fuel product supply. And blends need to provide also relevant information on all parts blended. Book and claim will be not possible under the FuelEU because we don't believe that we are ready to look and judge certain schemes and certain procedures that are happening, especially outside Europe. But fuel certification for bunkering outside EU is possible, and here the use of various fuel certification companies are needed. Of course, the big question is fuel availability in different ports. As ships will be using a number of different fuels, it is important that in different ports in the EU, but also outside the EU, they are storing this type of fuel. So we need to make sure that demand and the supply is connected, is meeting not just overall, not just globally, but in a specific port. So when ships arrive and they request a certain type of fuel, then then it's possible to do the bunkering on that type of fuel. And I think fuel producers and ports, they are looking into this issue. They are planning for the future how they can serve this market. We believe that for international shipping, the important paradigm is to move from spot bunkering to fuel supply contracts. So this contract, they will be, planning for years ahead for different ports, what kind of fuel will need to be made available for your ships, for your shipping company. So we imagine that there will be fuel supply contracts established between shipping companies and different ships and fuel suppliers and different ports to make sure that these fuels are supplied in a place and at a time when they are needed. Another important aspect is the flexibility mechanisms. I already mentioned this element. I guess they are especially crucial for small and medium-sized companies or ship owners. So it is possible to create a pool of different ships, and in this pool, in theory, there will be certain ships that are overperforming in terms of the compliance requirements. So there's, let's imagine there's a modern methanol ship that is creating a big percentage of savings, and then you can pool this extremely performing, very sophisticated, over-complying ship with a few darker or less well-performing ships, and the overcompliance of the methanol ships can be used to compensate for the underperformance of the other ships. So we see already interest from some bigger companies who are seeing that in the next few years they will start operating large modern vessels that will be able to run in methanol, and they will be overshooting their targets, and they will be happy to create a pool and use this compliance, share this compliance with other operators, with other vessels that are not performing that well. These pooling mechanisms can be applied for the greenhouse gas intensity, but also it can be applied for the RFMBO sub-target in case it comes into force in 2031. So this is something, the pooling mechanism is a good option, is a good flexibility option that should be looked at bigger companies in order to use their investment wisely and take advantage of it, but also for smaller companies who don't have the immediate investment capacity to try to borrow some compliance surplus from other companies, from other ships. Beyond pooling, we also have a banking mechanism. So if a ship on a certain year will be over complying, then this surplus can be moved to another year, so it's not being lost. It can be used for compliance for the next year or for the year ahead. And similarly, but in a reverse way, there's also be a borrowing. If your ship is underperforming on a specific year, then it can borrow from the target for the following year. so it can use it can make this borrowing like you do a bank in a bank. There are some restrictions on this borrowing. You cannot borrow more than 2% of your compliance, and the borrowing cannot happen in more than 2 consecutive years. But it's very also easy, making life easy for shipping companies and ship owners to play around with surpluses, with the lack of compliance in certain years. A little bit about the compliance mechanism, the governance. There's a lot of chapters on this in the regulation. Here there's a lot of links with the MRV. We try to make it the reporting and the monitoring as much as close to the MRV data input as possible. But of course, there's a lot of fuel-specific additional data that has not been collected by MRV so far. So these things, they need to be added to the reporting requirements. We are EMSA is helping us to develop, the connections between the MRV and our regulation, and identifying a new type of data that need to be submitted. That's what we call a monitoring template, and by the 31st of August, on every ship there is a need to submit such a monitoring template. The template is being created now through an implementing act that will be ready and published in a few months. And this monitoring template will be a description of the ship and how they are planning to do the monitoring and the reporting of their obligations on the energy use for the purpose of this regulation. And then there will be a FuelEU report that the ships need to submit to the verifier that gives all the relevant data that they collected about their voyages during the year. And then will be a verification report that the verifier will produce in case the FuelEU report is meeting the requirements, and there will be a FuelEU compliance report in case the ship is complying with the regulation. There will be a FuelEU database that is a center platform, an IT database where all the relevant information and compliance activities will be recorded. It is being developed right now by EMSA, but in the next few months there will be an implementing act that will be describing and introducing the database, and it will be up and running by the middle of the year, by September, when the monitoring template will need to be uploaded to this database. It will be associated to the TTIS MRV. There will be a FuelEU module there, and there will be very specific, very concrete explanations how ships need to be registered for the purpose of the ETS and also for purpose of the FuelEU. We believe that it will be a user-friendly explanation and how to do these things. We are also important to define the penalties. I'm not going into these details, though they need to be deterrent financial penalties. So that operators are not relaxed and they are trying to avoid non-compliance, and the allocation of the revenues from penalties, they will go into the budgets of the member states, who are supposed to use it into investment to improve the carbon reduction, the decarbonization of the maritime sectors. There will be extensive reporting and monitoring requirements, but we try to make them as user-friendly, as MRV-based, as much centered in the FuelEU database as possible. There's a review clause in the regulation by 2027 December. We need to do a complete review. So we know that this is something new, this is something never done, and we want to make sure that we are collecting information, concerns, problems from stakeholders, from member states, from regulators, from verifiers, how this regulation is functioning. So, and in 2 years, we want to make a real thorough analysis, looking at operational issues, looking at competitiveness issues, looking at whether the regulation is meeting its objectives, and very importantly, looking at the global picture, what's happening at the IMO, because as you know, our line, this is a European system. We needed to do it because we cannot wait forever on what's happening at the IMO. But if there's an agreement there and we are negotiating towards an agreement, then this system, our EU system, will be revisited, will be made in line and made to fit well to a global system. If the ambition is higher, we are ready to raise our ambition. If the ambition is lower at the MIO, we are not sure that we're going to make a lower ambition, and we do not want to make a lower ambition, that there will be some adjustments that we are deciding after consultations with stakeholders. Also, there are already a number of issues that we can signal that are already on our radar screen that we'll be looking at. One of them is, as I mentioned, the onboard carbon capture and storage. The other one is the black carbon issue, as I said, alignment with the IMO, and also kind of competitiveness issues, the potential evasive behavior of ships to avoid ETS and FuelEU obligations by choosing ports outside Europe, in North Africa, or potentially in the UK. So we are monitoring this very carefully. If this is happening, carbon leakage, is it happening? Is evasive behavior, rerouting is happening? And if yes, what can we do to avoid such potential negative consequences? So these are a list of issues that we are already looking at, and we'll be talking to stakeholders, you know, how progress should be done on these. This is kind of a compliance timeline, how the compliance year is looking at. So by the 31st of January, the FuelEU report needs to be submitted to the verifier. The report needs to include a number of important data that the shipping company is collecting during the year. One important difference here between the ETS and the FuelEU is that the regulated entity in the FuelEU is always the company that has the IMO identification number. In the ETS, it's different. There could be a private contract between the ship owner and the shipping company who holds who's regulated under the ETS, and whose obligation it is to comply with the ETS regulation. And the FuelEU, it is different. It is always the reference point is always the IMO identification number. We know that it complicates a little bit compliance, but we believe it is very important, because if there's a strong likelihood of a global system, of a global FuelEU standard, then we are sure that it will be based on the IMO structure, on the IMO number, identification number. So we need to make sure that the EU system and the global system can talk to each other, can be connected, and there's no big discrepancies or differences between the two, but the two can be merged into one. So first, the FuelEU report, then there will be a verification report that is produced by the verifier. It will be uploaded to the FuelEU database by the 31st of March. Then companies will be able to indicate that they want to use the flexibility mechanism, pooling, borrowing, and crediting. And then a FuelEU document of compliance will be issued. You have to be issued by the 30th of June. So this is the cycle. This is the timeline of a yearly compliance mechanism. I think this is one of my last slides, if not the the last one. So we said that the coming year, 2024, is very important. We need to do a lot of work here in the Commission as well, not just you as operators. The FuelEU is having references to 14 implementing and delegated acts. They are important to make sure that the regulation is functioning well and it's applied, equally and in a coherent manner in different member states. Some of these acts are very urgent. We are working on 4 that been already developed. So we have a draft. Currently, they are in inter-service consultations. And in February, these acts will be put on the Have Your Say platform of the European Commission, where for 4 weeks, anybody can look at them and comment. So this will be the time for you to do the commenting. These 4 acts, 3 of them are relating to the governance aspect, one about verification activities. The second one is about accreditation of verifiers. The third one is the monitoring plans, the template for monitoring plans that need to be submitted by August 2024. And the fourth one will be the use of the onshore power supply, the communications and the obligations of the use of OPS. So these are already in a quite advanced state. After the Have Your Say, they will go to the Committee of the Safe Seas, and the member states will vote on them. And after translations, they will be published. So I imagine by mid-spring, as late as by the end of the spring, they will be adopted. Just to flag again that we are working very closely with EMSA in the development of this act and also in the development of the FuelEU database, but also with the European Sustainable Shipping Forum. EXA is there. We are very active collaborators. We have the plenary, but even more importantly, we have some subgroups, the subgroup, and we are also having a number of work streams that are working on very important issues that will be relevant for the implementation of the directive. Some of these subgroups are advanced in their work, and some of these deliverables, they will be directly resulting in implementing and delegated acts. But I believe EXA is quite well connected to these work streams, and then you are distributing information about these to your members, to your stakeholders. Also to refer to the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuels Alliance. This is a kind of a stakeholder platform, stakeholder forum with more than 200 members here. The purpose is to try to connect fuel suppliers and those who are using these fuels so that they are talking to each other, they are together, start planning how they're going to work together, how fuels will be supplied. So they are doing monitoring, they are doing mapping about fuel and supply, and developing specific projects that will be helping to match supply with demand. And again, the Alliance is another thing that will be active during this year as well. And ETS implementation, waterborne instruments. There's some funding that is available. The EU Investment Fund, when there's a big amount of money that is being offered for operators. A new call came out in November, and the maritime sector is eligible to apply. The deadline, I think, is in April, and there will be a new call every year. For the moment, there's no specific call for the maritime sector, but I think there's a lot of interest from maritime, fuel producers, shipping operators, and also companies who are developing and manufacturing new technologies to apply for funding for their new projects. So there are funding and financing opportunities available there. And I think that was it. I don't know how long did I talk. Long, but just one more thing is that I understand that there's a lot of question. This was the basic things. We are developing a Q&A, which is relevant. Maybe you've seen the Q&A that was put on the website of the Commission that is covering the EU ETS. There's like around 60 questions, and there's a flow chart of what companies need to do step by step. We want to do something very similar for the FuelEU as well. We are already well advanced with this work, and this Q&A will be kind of trying to paraphrase, to translate the heavy legislative text of the regulation in a way that is easier to read, that is more easy to digest and understand for shipping companies, not just who are expert in compliance, but also for operators, for ship owners. So this should be coming. We hope that in a couple of weeks it will be put online, and that's why we are collecting questions that are coming from all kind of stakeholders. So the questions that we are hearing today, they will be also transferred to this Q&A, maybe not in exactly the same format, but in a similar format. So, maybe we can make it more general or more specific, but so please ask questions, and not for the reason just to get an answer, but for the reason that you see these answers followed up in the Q&A as well. Also, we are producing a flow chart, a step-by-step approach, what ship owners, shipping companies need to do for the compliance of this regulation.